Hello, everyone. How are you? Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar, whose topic is the circular economy and approaches to sustainability. First, I want to introduce Mawazo Institute. And Mawazo Institute is a women-led African organization based in Nairobi, Kenya, supporting early career women researchers as they work to find solutions to local and global development challenges. This webinar is brought to you, or rather presented by the Nairobi Ideas Exchange, which is part of the Mawazo Institute Voices program, that is the Mawazo Voices program, which works to amplify the work of African researchers and shares findings on African women in higher education and research. This event is supported by funding from the Open Society Foundation. As part of the Climate Week activities, this is the last activity we have for the Climate Week. The whole of this week at Mawazo Institute, we have been having the Climate Week where we have had different speakers from various organizations. First, on the 22nd, which was on Tuesday, we had a planetary health webinar, which was facilitated by Melvin Anyango, who is the founder of the Planetary Health East African Hub, and she is based in Eldoret. And on the same day, on the same evening, we had the Science Quiz Night, which featured Dr. Fiona Moyes, Georgie Dirango, and Wanjira Longawa. The third activity we had on the Climate Week was the Human Systems and Planetary Health event, which was co-hosted by the ICCA, which is Institute of Climate Change Adaptation from the Nairobi University, and Mawazo Institute, where different research projects around planetary health and human systems were presented to a panel, and thereafter had a panel discussion on issues around planetary health and climate change. And now with us today here, we have the circular economy and approaches to sustainability, where we will hear from a sustainability advisory manager from Kenya Climate Innovation Center Consulting Limited, that is KCIC Consulting, and her name is Edna Kimenju. Just a short brief about Edna. Edna has an MSc in Sustainability and Business from the University of Leeds in the UK. She currently supports businesses with a comprehensive range of tailored end-to-end sustainability in integration solutions that help them tackle climate change, develop strategies that boost sustainable development, embrace clean energy technologies, transition to a circular economy, innovate around their products or services processes, accelerate access to sustainable finance, and streamline supply chains. I know that is quite a mouthful and quite a lot of information all at once, but that's why we have Edna today. She will tell us more about this, her work, as well as why do we need to consider, or rather, why do we have these conversations around circular economy when we talk about sustainability and climate change. Welcome, Edna.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And I'm really sorry for the mouthful, but just in simple, as you said, I'm Edna Kimenju, and I'm a sustainability practitioner. I'm currently working for Kenya Climate Innovation Center Consulting Limited, so it's KCIC Consulting, as their sustainability advisory manager. And what I do, to put it in short, as a practitioner, is I am the bridge between people, planet, and businesses. So I get to help businesses integrate environmental and social considerations in their day-to-day operations. So that's just a summary of the mouthful you had to read. That's what we do. And how we do that is We support businesses be able to come up with their sustainability strategies, be it in the form of net zero strategies. I'll get to discuss this as I go along. So trying to look at how to adopt low carbon technologies into their business, as we're going to discuss circular economy strategies and green economy strategies. We also offer sustainability reporting services. So we get to report on what your company or your business is doing. We also offer climate change advisory services, so that be it risk assessments or just trying to see how a business can integrate climate change to come up with new products and services, and also integrate their operations. So those are some of the things we do. If you're thinking anything climate change and you're a business, we are the people you come to, and then we get to sit down and innovate what kind of service you can get. So that's a brief about me, and I think with that I can jump into what brought us here, which is the circular economy conversation, and just trying to look at approaches to sustainability from that lens. So I'll just start off with a sustainability context. I tend to do this just to orient the audience and get to ensure that we are all on the same page, because as a practitioner, a lot of times I have noticed definitions for sustainability are quite broad and different people understand different things. So for sustainability, I get to maybe ask the people in the audience, what does sustainability mean to you? And I think at this particular point, just so that we can have a conversation, is we can maybe drop in the chat, what does sustainability mean to you? So I can give you like a minute or two. And then while we're at it, we can also try and reflect on what are some activities you as an individual do or your business does that can be categorized as sustainability. Just again, context: sustainability is the nexus between people, planet, and your business. So what activities are you doing as an individual or your business that can be classed as sustainability? So you can reflect upon that as you're dropping in the chat what sustainability means to you. And then I think as we go along, we'll get to read through some of the responses we get. I think, Ruth, you're going to assist me with that. But as we are doing, are there any answers coming in, or do I just first of all go on and then see what guys thought?
There are answers coming in. We have one answer on the chat. Okay,
so I see there's sustainability means thinking about how to preserve raw and finite resources. I see Josphat saying that it's being able to use a resource to meet my need without compromising the same for another generation of future. That's very good. Tafmina, I hope I said that right, is to use resource effectively and efficiently. Alberto said democracy with planetary limits. Elizabeth said comprises recycling, stakeholder management, green economy. Okay, those are some good answers. Deliberate regeneration, yeah, that's it as well. Just give it a second more. Okay, I think I can go along just to ensure we keep time, but those answers kind of like fall within exactly what sustainability is. Dana said the use of resources without compromising the ability to meet future generations. And thanks, guys, for helping me actually define it, because as they said, and the reason we bring in this definition is because this is the foundation of sustainability. This particular report that's called Our Common Future is the definition of and foundation of sustainability, and just says that it's development that meets the needs of current generations, as Dana and others had said, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs and aspirations. But what does this mean to businesses? At times we ask. So for businesses, this means meeting economic needs of their stakeholders. And stakeholders is a key word, because we are not talking about shareholders here. We are talking about all interested people who are affected by that business or could be impacted by that business, and vice versa, who could while minimizing the threat of environmental destruction, there's someone who mentioned about the environmental destruction, and also striving for intergenerational and intragenerational social equity. Intergenerational and intergenerational talks about our current generation and the future generations to come. And I think that was even implied in some of the answers we got. So it's good to know that we are on the same page on that. But why do we need sustainability? So sustainability is why we are calling for it is because of the natural resource use that we've noticed, or with time there's been rising pressure on some of the resources that we are using. And one of it is water. And the statistics for water are quite interesting because according to current studies, we need about 1.5 Earths. If we are looking at the natural resource use, we need 1.5 Earths of resources to be able to sustain the 7 billion people at our current consumption. So that's quite a stretch because we only have one. So the question is, how do we ensure whatever we are using is what we have access to? And then at the moment, the material demand per capita is about 12.2 tons. And it's come up from 7.4 tons in 1970. So that's in a span of about, is it 30 years, thereabouts? So it's come up by that percentage. And when we're looking at specifically water, we have only 3% of water is actually drinkable. And 2.5% of that is frozen. So that means 7 billion population, we have 0.5% of water to use. And of that 0.5%, 72% is used in agriculture, 16% is used in households, and 12% is used in industries. So a lot of statistics in the previous years have raised a red flag when it comes to water scarcity. And just like a fun fact, do you know how much water is used in some of the things you consume? In fact, in case you like rice, that's going to be about 3,000 to 5,000 liters to produce a kg of rice. So that's how much water is used in that. It gets worse when we're looking at cotton and industrial production, but those are some of the numbers we look at. Another natural resource that is becoming scarce is fossil fuel. And when it comes to fossil fuel, we look at it from the coal as a perspective, and the coal is estimated to last less than 200 years. And we have been dependent on coal for a long time, but the good thing is conversation now post COP26, which was a huge environmental conference last year, is on trying to face down coal. But also we are reliant on oil, and oil, according to a report in 2020, said we only have 46.2 years of oil left at our current consumption. When it comes to gas, we have less than 60 years of consumption. So what does that mean if we're talking about intergenerational social equity? What does that mean for the generations that are coming? Energy as well, we are using quite a bit, and at the rate we are on a trajectory for 1.8 emissions. So that's quite a bit, because that will result to a lot of climate change impacts that we need to think about. And most of that energy supply is from fossil, but also we have a bit of 81.3% is fossil, and then 9.7 is nuclear, then we have 9 from renewable sources. So we actually need to figure out how we get the renewable energy up. Other natural resources that are strained include forest and biodiversity. We've actually seen cases where forests are being cut down in order to meet demand for things like palm oil, especially in the areas surrounding Indonesia and Malaysia. So there's a lot of forest loss and biodiversity, which that also touches on land use because of the increasing number of people. We need to urbanize, and forest and land use are changing. There's also metals and minerals. When it comes to metals and minerals, copper is one of the things that is actually being classified as being scarce. We need to look at how we ensure we use what is within our reach. There's also non-metallic minerals like lithium and phosphorus, and even sodium chloride, which is salt. I know if there are Kenyans in the room, we have ours at Magati. And then there's air. And particularly the interesting part about this, the air part is it touches on the theme of the year, of the week, sorry, on planetary health. Because if we're having increase of emissions and increase of carbon gases in the atmosphere, what does that mean for our lungs and the air we consume? So also, waste management is a reason why we need sustainability. Solid waste is now what comes from our households. And when it comes to Kenya, we generate about 4 million tons. And then specifically in Nairobi, we have 2,400 tons. Plastics, this is actually a huge conversation, but plastics at about 8.3 billion tons at the moment. So that's like having a truckload of plastic going into the sea every minute. So we actually are even seeing that some studies that have come up that plastics are now being seen in our systems like humans, because the microplastics that move from the plastics to the ocean to the fish are now coming to us. So we need to think about what does that mean for our health. Or food waste, when it comes to food waste, a third of the GHG gases actually comes from food waste. And specifically in Africa, 40% of the food that gets to the consumers gets thrown away. We actually need to look at how do we innovate around that and ensure there's circularity. And also we lose about 72 billion annually when it comes to post-harvest losses in sub-Saharan Africa. We also have electronic waste. Just the statistics for electronic waste in Kenya is we have about 53.6 million metric tons. That's globally. And in Kenya, we generate about 44,000. So these are just numbers to try and give you why we need sustainability in this field. We're also having issues when it comes to textile. What do we do with clothes after they've either they've started coming apart? So where do we dump them and things like that? And some of these textiles we're talking about are not purely cotton. So how long does it take for them to disintegrate? There's also additional biodegradable materials, and under biodegradable, we have paper, human and animal waste. We also have non-biodegradable, which is the metal cans and glass, and then a bit of hazardous. So I think now that we just touched on waste management, I think, Ruth, we can just do the quick poll here and just trying to figure out, do you know your material? So how long does certain elements you interact with each day take to degrade? So I think, Ruth, this is your cue. So how long does vegetables take to decompose? So we can take a second to go through. It's just 9 random facts. Okay, I can see some of the responses coming in. I'll give it 1 more minute, then we can end the poll. Okay, some interesting answers. Okay, I think yeah, we can close it up there. So Ruth, do I end the poll on my end or do you?
Let me end it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, so
okay.
Yeah, I've shared the results. So when it comes to vegetables, most of you are spot on. It takes about 5 days to 1 month for them to decompose, depending on whether you've used the appropriate composting techniques also, and also depending on the material of the vegetable. Orange peels, it actually takes about 6 months for them to decompose. So that one, but also it depends on, as I said, how you compost it. And it depends on, there's a bit of variability when it comes to oranges. but most of it takes about 6 months. Oh, can you guys see the results from your end? Ruth, please confirm that.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think I don't have to like fully go through each of them, as long as you can see the responses. And then this is just like a prompt for you to think about the things you interact with each and every day, and then see how do you know the rate at which they decompose, just for you to be aware and conscious of your usage and your consumption. Now let's move on to the main thing of the day, which is circular economy. So circular economy is just trying to get us away from the linear economy. So the linear economy that we've used for very many years is where we take something, make something out of it, use it, and then dispose it. But the circular economy tends to borrow from the natural systems. You remember when we were in primary school or perhaps even high school, we used to do food chains where the bird eats the worm, and then the bird is eaten by something else, and it's a whole chain. When the last thing in the chain then dies and comes back to the earth and feeds the whole system. So when it comes to circular economy, we are just trying to mimic that system. And other concepts that are similar to circular economy is what we call cradle to cradle and also biomimicry. In case you're interested, the linear economy is at times referred to as cradle to grave, but now we are trying to change it to cradle to cradle. And when it comes to circular economy, it's just maximizing the use of the existing assets while reducing dependence on raw materials and minimizing waste. And as a result, this now demands that we redesign and transform how we manage resources, how we make and use products, and what we do with the material afterwards. That's just context for what a circular economy tries to do. But how do we go about it? So Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is kind of like the rule book on circular economy, has this visualization of how to go about circular economy. And they refer to this diagram as the butterfly diagram. So when it comes to the butterfly diagram, there are two main processes. There's the technical process as well as the biological process. So when it comes to the technical cycle, which is the one in blue, I think that should be my right here. The products are kept in circulation through reuse or repair, remanufacture, and recycling, just to ensure that there's not much waste. And this tends to be used in materials like metal and steel. And then on the other side, the biological process is used for biodegradable materials. So when it comes to maintenance and reuse, this preserves the product as is and ensures that the length of the product is lengthened. Whereas recycling preserves the material, not the product, but the material that is used to make the product. So those are the kind of like big differentiator when it comes to reuse versus recycling. Recycling is still a good concept, but now for us to recycle things, we have to use additional labor and energy because we are now transforming our product to its raw material. So we are mostly encouraged to try and reuse and maintain things before we get to the recycling process. So that's the technical cycle. When it comes to the biological cycle, there's first of all the caskets. And the casket here is maybe if you have a cotton t-shirt, when it wears, instead of throwing it away, you can maybe convert it, or maybe a pair of jeans, because I think I've done this with a pair of jeans. Once my jeans get a tear and I can't repair them, then I get to convert them into like shorts. So I usually like cut and do a DIY hack and put stickers here and there. Then after the shorts now have done its time, then maybe I can convert it into another DIY hack, maybe do like a wall painting with a few elements of it. I'm done with that product, maybe I could now shred it and make it into fillings for furniture. After that, it could go. So it's cascading it from the initial product into other subsequent products. And then when it gets to the end of its life, then we now get to consider if it's a fully cotton product, then we can consider taking through the aerobic process. Either it now produces a biogas or biofuel, or if it's something that can be restored into the biological system, that's fine. If it's compostable all the way to going into farming, then it goes through that process. So it gives it the whole circular element of it. So that was just a visualization of what circular economy, how to go about circular economy. When it comes to the circular economy landscape, we conducted research on circular economy in Africa. And the landscape as is Africa is home to about 19 of the world's largest dump sites. The amount of waste generated is projected to triple to 174 million tons. And then that's a huge number, given that the continent is really going to see an inclination of population as we go about, as we move towards 2050. And then around 4% of that generated waste is recycled. And yes, the industry has a potential of recycling 80%. So people in businesses, this is a question of how do you plug into the 80% and be able to make waste a resource. We'll come to that in a few. The study which we did showed some barriers, and some of them were regulatory and policy barriers, because we noticed in some of the countries, the ministries like to work in silos. So there's no integration of like the waste management. So there's no waste management framework across the board. So maybe this ministry will try and do this. This is the understanding of waste. And then another ministry will do, and then at times they collide. So those are some of the barriers that came across. Then definitely financial, because when it comes to recycling or even reuse, the acquisition stage, which is now trying to get the material from the consumer, is usually a very hard process and demands for volumes for the project to make sense financially. So some of the people who would want to go into those spaces are finding the challenges or even coming up with the technologies that is needed to acquire the waste from the consumer, or even process or reprocess that into something else. Also, because the business cases in this particular space are now being formulated, so people who want to invest in that space are having a challenge trying to get financing to be able to do it. But now there's been a slight turnaround in the industry, and we're seeing more people come on board. So there's also technological barriers, and I think that will be shown when we look at what businesses should be able to do to implement circular economy. And I think that's the core of why all of us are here, which is the business value in circular economy. So the first, I'll look at it from a repair economy. And if you remember the diagram I showed, the butterfly diagram, the maintenance, which was the first cycle in the technical system, is where the repair economy falls. So we class it as maintenance, prolong, and the share part of the butterfly diagram. When it comes to that, I like using examples we've seen, so that we don't see as if circular economy is a very foreign concept to us in Africa, or even us operating. I don't know if any of you were in 844, we were probably taught how home science, and I remember we used to do a bit of sewing back buttons and things like that, and that's exactly it. You could do it as an individual, or if the cloth is beyond what you can do as an individual, then you take it to a tailor. When it comes to bicycles as well, I remember when I was younger, I used to make a couple of runs to the repair shop just down the block or even the street, because either I don't have enough, I don't know to call it, air in my tires, my riding bikes, or the chain has come apart or things like that. So that's still circular economy practices. So this is not things that are coming out of the air. It's things we've been doing. We just need to realize that is what circular economy is. But what does closed repair look when it's maybe scaled into a business context? We're actually seeing some brands right now having in-house repairs. So you buy, and one case is like Patagonia, is when you buy an outfit from them, they have a lifetime of repair service once you acquire the item. So whenever maybe your jacket gets a tear, you can ship it back to them, they repair and then send it to you. So these are some of the models we are seeing in the space. When it comes to bike and car repair, we are also seeing an uprise of repair workshops and cafes. And what is this? Is just that maybe a warehouse where people come to repair different things. It could be blenders, electronics in the house, and then they're actually doing it as they train people to do them themselves. So once you go to the workshop, or you acquire some skills you can use in the house. And we've seen quite a bit of this in the UK, but also the good thing is Kenya is also trying the same, and there are actually been a couple of repair and reuse workshops that have been going on in the past month. So in case this is a space you're interested in, those are some of the innovations you can look at. Still in maintenance, there is the sharing economy. And for the sharing economy, due to COVID, we've seen this surge up, and it's things like co-working spaces. This is still a circular economy innovation. We're also seeing ride sharing. And before we think ride sharing is something that is just seen in the West, where there's actually a few businesses for those who are familiar with Kenya or in Juja, and one of them is actually called Cycle. And what Cycle does is it owns certain bikes and it rents them out or hires them out to students. So if you need to run to class, maybe you woke up late and you have to run to class, you just go leave your ID and cycle to school. If you want to put in like a workout or just run your errands, you just come get one and then they bill you per hour. So it's not, we are seeing some representation of such innovations in the country. We also have enclosed rentals in the sharing economy, and for this we have businesses such as La Joie Dress Rental. I think it's a Kenyan, I think it is a Kenyan company that is giving guys options of if you need a dress for a function, instead of going to buy one, you could rent it out and use it and return. So these are some of the models when it comes to sharing economy. And in a bigger context, there's a company called By Rotation in the UK that is doing the same, but for designer clothes, the high-end designer clothes. Another thing with sharing economy is we are seeing a surge in communal living spaces, and this is guys coming together as a community and building something that's similar to eco villages. So now you have, for your individual space, you probably have like a place to sleep, but now there's shared facilities like the lounge areas and kitchen. So instead of each, maybe the community has 50 people, instead of each having kitchens yourself, maybe you just have a smaller space for your kitchen, then a bigger communal area. So these are some of the concepts we have when it comes to sharing economy. When it comes to the second one, we have reuse and redistribute. And here, I like using this example for Blueband, because if you're in a Kenyan household, I can almost bet you still have Blueband containers. And this is what our parents used to do. So we get the Blueband, once it's finished, we use that as storage for either dry grains, or we actually use it for storing things in the fridge. So this is circularity as is. So our parents were doing these things, so we shouldn't see circular economy as a new concept. Also, another thing is the refill concept. And this one, for us, maybe in Kenya and Africa, we could connect it to like the milkman concept, which is just, we used to go and get milk maybe a couple of streets down from where you live, and you'd go with your actual plastic container, then have it refilled, then come with it, wash it, and something like that. We also had return And for this, the best example I could give was the glass Coca-Cola and Fanta bottles. So you'd go leave a deposit for the crate or even the bottle. I remember when I think it was smaller, the deposit was like 10 shillings. You leave the deposit, then once you bring the glass bottle, you get to get your deposit back. So that's what the circular economy is referring to as return. But when we're doing all these things, there's something we need to be mindful of. And this is what I call designing for reuse. And I put this picture here to refer to a company that is called Keep. They actually have a keep cup. Actually, I do have mine here. So this is a keep cup. You guys can see it. And what a keep cup does is it's designed for reuse. And what they did is they separated the components because from their studies, they realized when you buy a to-go cup or even like a thermal cup, after some use, it tends to not be fully functional. But instead of replacing the whole cup, they differentiated the elements. So you could have, if this gets lost or it gets cut, you just have to order this, not replace the whole cup. And then I think anyone with a coffee cup, you know this particular part at times becomes loose. So they separated this as well. And then now you have the two elements. So whenever your cup disintegrates at a certain point, you're just replacing certain elements of it. They've even gone further now. Well, I think by last week, they converted the bottle to a bottle, the cup to a bottle. So it has like some screwable hinges. So you can have one thing that now becomes your water bottle and your keep cup as well. So this is what we are trying to look at when it comes to designing for reuse. And I hope me showing you these examples spurs like some thoughts and some ideas of what we can do in the African space when it comes to circular economy. Under reuse also, we have some concepts, like one is refill on the go. And when it comes to refill on the go is come with your container, refill it, then go with it. So that's a concept that circular economy, and one big example is this company called Algramo, which actually goes to your neighborhood in these tuk-tuks, and then they bring you sanitary supplies or soaps, DPH products. And then other scenarios we are seeing is return on the go. And for return on the go is you go to a restaurant, get food in a reusable container, then you go home with it. And then when you're coming back to order something else, or maybe they could have like drop-off points, you get to drop off the container you had. So these are some of the models we are seeing when it comes to reuse economy. And then there's also return from home. And I put in the Starsoft one just for context purposes. Anyone who's probably be keen in shopping malls now, Unilever kind of brought in the sachet one, so that instead of selling you the big 2-liter container every time you buy, you just need to buy it once. Then next time you come, you get the concentrated one and add water, and then you have your fabric softener. So this is being used in different concepts, especially in the DPH products. Then the last one is loop, which happens to be my favorite because I really want to see concepts like this in Africa and Kenya, and it's buying products in reusable containers. So for Loop, what they do is they've collaborated with very many brands, the Unilevers, the Nestle, and the likes, and they've made stainless steel containers and some are glass containers. So when you buy from them, you get the bag with whatever you've ordered in stainless steel containers. So when you finished using them, you just drop them back there and take them to the drop-off point. Or when you order in another order, they come and pick the ones you've already finished. So that minimizes the number of single-use plastic that is in the ecosystem. So that's about reuse. When it comes to recycling, players in the solid waste management, the likes of Taka Solutions, who now take your waste as is. If you choose to separate it in the house, the better, but they take the waste and then they get to separate it and recycle components of elements of it that is recyclable. So be it if it's PETs, they kind of like crush it. You can actually, if you're interested, you could book a tour with them and then go see what happens to your waste. So they separate the organic, then do composting for that. They do the different types of plastics, then they sell it to a party that can reuse them. Recycling also, we look at e-waste management, and at this particular point, we have the likes of We Center, which is a local one that kind of takes in your waste, and they've been organizing quite a bit of pickup or drives in the Kilimani, and they have stations in retail shops like Carrefour. So in case you have your mobile or electronic devices that need to be recycled, you can be able to drop them off. And if they're big, you can actually ring them and then organize for them to be collected. In Africa also, outside Kenya, we also have AST in South Africa and SET ITC in Senegal. So those are some of the players in the e-waste space. And then we have also some people who are doing recycling for certain elements. So in this case, maybe recycling for fashion. And particularly this company is called Salubata, and Salubata is a Nigerian company. It's one of the companies we supported as part of the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program we were running with GCE and AFDB. And what they do is they take plastics from the ocean and make shoes out of them. So these are innovations. And I think in Kenya, we've also seen people who are making jewelry from plastics, from the oceans, and very many other products in the fashion line. We also have some players who are doing recycling for built environment. And particularly in the Kenyan context, we have one called Jenge Makers, and they do the plastic and mix them with sand and other components and make bricks. The cover of bricks we use for packing and things like that. That's the Kenyan context. Then we also have in Ghana, there's a company called Build For You that converts waste wood into construction materials. So these are some of the technologies that are going on within the recycling space. So other circular economy technologies is waste biomass to composting, for example. So this actually you could do at home. So you could get a container and get the ingredients you need to compost your organic waste and use that waste for other plants in case you're a plant parent or you actually have a garden somewhere in your compound. We've also seen a rise of, let me go to the waste biomass to fuel, and particularly actually as KCIC, we're supporting quite a bit of these innovations that are using biomass to make biogas, different forms of ethanol that are actually being used as an alternative to burning coal, burning charcoal, and burning wood in rural communities. We're also having innovations that are making gas out of it, so forms of natural gas and technologies within that space. There's also circular economy as a service, and this one I brought forth because we are seeing some concepts, especially in the West, where guys are now leasing clothes rather than buying. And one good example is one called Mad Jeans, where you buy, you get your jeans and then you pay a certain amount monthly to a certain extent, I think about 30 months. Then after that, after you've cleared 30 months, you could now fully own the jeans, or you could return it and get another in return. So this is leasing concepts that are coming on board. And also we also have a company called Interface that is a carpet making company that is using the same model where they lease to you the carpet and actually give you like additional cleaning services, and then after a long duration of time, you could give back the carpet to them. So brings about the circularity element to it. Then we are also seeing alternative biodegradable packaging. And this one I am also quite keen on because we need to see more innovations in this space, especially in Africa, because we have quite a bit of natural resources that are regenerative that we can use for packaging, and this could be a niche house for us. For example, we are seeing designs that are using sugarcane, are using bamboo, are using corn actually the other day. So instead of using the plastic bubble wrap to preserve things that are delicate, they are making the things from corn, so that so you can place your delicate item around it. And it's like, oh, that's quite interesting. So these are some of the innovations, and it requires a bit of material scientists working with innovators and human design thinkers to come up with this technology. So that's corn. We also see alternative packaging that's coming from algae, and that one is actually edible, and also seaweed. So as an African continent, we can try and see how to spur innovation towards that direction. I think that's the whole point of this particular presentation, is just to spur thoughts on what can be done and what is possible for businesses when it comes to circular innovation, and just have a conversation and see how else we can advance the space. So Ruth, that brings me to my end. I think I've been rambling for quite a bit.
Hi, thank you for that. It was quite the session, but also, like you started by saying, we have been practicing circular economy even without knowing it. It seems like too far off. Like when you say car repair, cloth repair, when you say, people think it's a term that is hard. Well, that is quite distant. Yes, and at this point, thank you for that. And I will pass the baton to my colleague, Kari Mugo.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. Such an informative presentation, and I just want to encourage anyone who might have questions about some of the content that was shared, or perhaps you're thinking about, how to apply this within your own sphere of influence, as I like to call it, whether as an individual or as a business. Please do share your questions. We did have one question about whether we are able to share this webinar afterwards, and this is going to be available on the Mawazo Institute YouTube account. We probably just need to do some light editing, so that should be available in the coming days if you just find us online. I don't see any questions quite yet. I see one comment. Good presentation, highly informative. So I guess I will start by asking my own question. And I'm going to take us a step back. And you mentioned something about the fact that Africa is home to 19 of the 50 world's largest dump sites. And as someone who is really interested in thinking through how we can better manage, waste and all of that, I'm just curious why this is so. Is this part of the fact that, Africa is a dumping ground for, many other countries, or is this our own waste that is creating this problem, Edna?
That's a whole conversation. But so there have been kind of like agreements that the Western world, because the West is quite a lot, so they export their waste to different regions in the world. So some of them used to go to the Asian countries, but also a bulk of it used to come to Africa. And I think there was actually a bit of an uproar when it comes to that sometime in 2020, because now governments have started coming up and telling Western countries, you can't keep sending us your waste. We don't have the facilities to be able to process it, and it's actually just becoming problematic for us. So that has been the case. We are, as a nation, we are trying to retract that, but also there's still the conversation of, is waste a waste or is waste a resource? So that is still unclear, because we haven't fully defined circular economy guidelines and frameworks in the country. We just actually have our waste management framework, but now a lot of players are trying to influence and push for policy within the circular economy space. So it's kind of like a give. We are not exactly sure where it will fall eventually, but hopefully as more developed countries get to adopt circular economy, the burden of exporting the waste to developing nations will subside, or the African states will be able to say, that's it, we don't want your waste anymore. And then that could reduce the number of dump sites. But also, as I said, is it a waste or is still a question?
That's a very good point. Is it a waste or is it a resource? And that brings me to the next question that I then had, which is around what kind of enabling policies are needed, and you've mentioned that we in Kenya, that is, do not have circular economy guidelines and frameworks. So what are the types of enabling policies that are needed for businesses and individuals to be able to take advantage of circular economy models?
When it comes to circular economy, at times, it falls under waste management guidelines. So it won't necessarily be coined as circular economy, though I know the likes of sustainable inclusive business are doing quite a bit of work within that space to try and set their guidelines. And in fact, they are pushing for the extended producer responsibility. And what this is trying to put in a guideline where it says that the responsibility of the waste of a product is not the consumer's responsibility. It still retains to be the producer. So for example, quote unquote, if you're doing a soft drink, so most of the time, by the time it gets to the counter and you buy it, the responsibility of how it is recycled or reused is the consumer's responsibility. But now with this April, now it will still be the producer's responsibility to figure out how does that product get recycled. How that translates, it could be soft drinks or plastic manufacturing companies having reverse logistics. And by reverse logistics, I mean those vending machines that take back your plastic, and hopefully they get to pay us for bringing back the plastic. So you get a bit of incentive for bringing it back. So it could look like that, or they could, I've seen some concepts in the Western where they tag their plastics and they get to know where each of their plastic that came from the business is at. With April, once that passes, then we'll start seeing quite a bit of push for producers to be a bit responsible with the products they put out here.
Thanks for that response, Edna. And hearing you talk about the plastics and whose responsibility it is reminds me of a conversation that Mawazo had with who's a waste management expert a few years ago, and we were discussing the plastic bag ban. I always struggle with that, which was, the first of its kind on the continent, and it had very harsh penalties, right, around this. And she was challenging us on that and saying that's a great idea, but the issue really isn't the plastic use, it's sort of the end cycle of the plastic, right? So we haven't quite thought through the entire cycle of where the plastic then goes, and that perhaps a better way would have been to think about how to better manage this plastic waste. So thank you for that. I do have some comments that have come in, and please, I want to encourage you to share any questions you have. So Morris says that some of the West countries do dump their waste to Africa, especially when Asian countries stop the dumping of waste in their region. However, the lack of investment in how we can use the waste in regards to energy production and production of different products from them is due to poor policies, lack of an environment where skills can be built to engage this, and also opening up for private sector to take advantage of circular economy models. So thank you for that comment, Maurice. And then I do have a question here from who is one of our partners for Climate Week. We had a fantastic research day at Mawazo Institute for Peace Environmental Studies with them. And he says, thanks for the great presentation. From a circularity gap point, what would you say are key competitive priority areas for Africa?
I looked at the gap point from the study we did that showed the three barriers we are looking at. It was the regulation, the finances, and the technologies. I would actually focus on the two, and it's the last two. So the technologies of how we go about circularity. And that's why I framed my presentation from what could businesses do, because then that sparks the conversation of what innovations do we need to come up, what ideation processes do we need, what technologies do we need to support that, then creates a demand on that side. And then once that demand is present and there's a lot of traction in that space, we can be able to attract finance. And actually that's some of the work we kind of do with KCIC, where we now bring on board technologies that are looking at climate change related solutions, and we link them up to access to finance. components. And while we show proof of concepts in kind of those scenarios, then it gives us room to actually go and lobby for policy. Now we go to the third barrier, which was the regulatory framework and the barriers there. So we now get to say, we are having this and we're supporting this number of businesses. We can actually see there's a bit of interest in this side. We need to create an enabling environment that supports these businesses. And then we now start pushing the government and any other advocacy players that are in that space, and we get to rehabilitate the space. So that's how I would tackle them in succession. Yeah. I hope that answers the question, though.
I think it does. Comment here. Yes, Gandhi says thank you. As another comment, I think in response to the question that was asked, and he says that we need to adopt Elia's framework, circular economy, which has 4 action components that support its adoption. So circular product design and production, which includes eco-design and looks at environmental impact during production. So looking at ways to reuse it. Business models for circular economy, looking at collaborative approaches in marketing and supply of products. Cascade and reverse cycle skills. Cascade means reusing product through its value chain, which I think you mentioned in your presentation. And reverse products are collected and brought back after use. We have cross-cycle and cross-sector collaboration as well, which I think is necessary in tackling many of the challenges that we're bringing up throughout this whole week. And he says that having such frameworks adopted by companies can also help in policy lobbying. Great.
Yeah, true. And touching on the production part or designing for circularity, that is the backbone of this whole thing. Because if all people who are generating products get to design with circularity in mind, then that ensures that one end of life product is another source to another. And my perfect example is this cup. Like, if I can be able to just replace, because this is the one that actually wears out quickly. So I'll probably have this cup for almost 5 to 10 years, have replaced this 2 or 3 times. So instead of throwing the whole cup, which initially that's what I'd have done, I get to just replace this component. And each product and service can be able to sit down with design thinkers and be able to look at how do we deassociate these things and ensure that we can, instead of lose the whole product, just replace certain components of it. Yeah, so it gives it a longer life.
Thanks for that response, Edna. If anyone else has any comments or questions, please do share these in the chat or the Q&A section. And if you would like to learn more about Edna's work, her area of expertise, she does have her LinkedIn on the screen where you can connect with her, and also the reports that you mentioned that are being produced by the KCIC. Yes. So many abbreviations. Yes. Okay. Excellent presentation. The comment we have from Maria Lasha, who's joined us from Arusha, Tanzania. Thank you so much for being here. And she says, they say that they're thinking of imposing the concept of circular economy to our children, especially primary school. And I think that's a really important component, education and training. So I wonder if you have any comments to that, Edna.
When it comes to all things sustainability, just beyond circular economy, where we are noticing we cannot ignore the young people. They have become such a voice and such a resource that they are helping us be able to champion for these things, because to them, they're the ones who are going to experience this world after we've messed it up. So they're probably there looking at us wondering, so what are you guys doing? So they're adopting sustainability and championing for climate change in a way that most of the players had not anticipated. So equipping them and empowering them. In fact, even action, what was it called? Climate action for empowerment was actually a very big conversation when it comes to COP26, where the UK government actually committed to streamline climate change within their educational process. And actually about 200 governments actually committed to the same thing. So this is going to be huge. And we have some players who are now coming up with curriculum for kids. So in fact, even Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is the backbone for circular economy, I think is probably even looking into how to simplify circular economy so the kids can understand. And with that also, we are giving them the power to design things from when they are young. So when they become the us in the future, they understand what we are talking about designing for circular economy. So yeah, and in case you need just a run through on what that would look like for your schools, you can definitely reach out to me and I'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Edna. Of the 200 countries you've mentioned who signed up to try and mainstream circular economy models, I'm assuming Kenya and many of the African countries are signed up to that. I hope.
Well, the good thing about this COP26 for having been on the African continent, because we are all fighting, not exactly fighting. We're all pushing for adaptation because we know as a continent, we are the ones who are going to feel the effects of climate change. And therefore, in this particular COP, there was quite a united voice when it comes to African nations in the push for adaptation. So as a result, we ended up signing up to a lot of these other treaties, I won't call them treaties, but commitments that were associated with climate change. And Kenya was part of this commitment. So how that translates into education, we are yet to see. But Kenya has, I have to give credit where it's due. Kenya has really been, would I say an influencer or an influential figure when it comes to climate change in the African bloc. We were, like, of all the sessions I participated in those Kenyan speakers. So with the minister or representative, the Kenyan voice was for. So for Kenya, I'm not too worried about it. The implementation, maybe we are yet to see, but the commitments were made and we were quite loud about it.
That's really great to hear. I think sometimes when we're talking about these issues, it can feel a bit hopeless. So it's good to know that there seems to be some commitment and sense of urgency from the African bloc of nations and our government here within Kenya. Anything else they would like to share with Edna, please do type that in the chat box or again in the Q&A. As I said at the top of the Q&A, we will be sharing out a recording of this webinar on the Mawazo Institute YouTube page. In the coming days, please do keep an eye out for that if you would like to revisit Edna's presentation. If you do not have any other questions, I will go ahead and just end the session with a big thank you to Edna for your time and your expertise. It's really great to, just see how people are thinking about this and to know that there are already initiatives and businesses that have started to implement the circular economy model within their work. And what a fantastic way to close out I mean Mawazo Institute's week of, climate week. Health as a concept. And so if you are interested in learning more about, what we covered, you can also visit us online. We are at Mawazo Institute on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, one other one, Twitter, that's what it is. Ruth, if you could please just type in our web address for Climate Week into the chat box as well, so you can see the full series of events. I'm so happy by your participation in this chat. Who is in Rwanda? He says that, we are working with the Africa Leadership University, where we have developed a circular economy curriculum for both universities and secondary schools. That's really great to see. And their aim is looking into young startups, adopting circular models so that into the technology aspect that you were talking about, adopting circular models into their business development models so they can understand the importance in social, environmental, and economic impacts in communities. Lucy says, very informative presentation. Thank you very much. And then Gandhi, who is working on that adaptation part of, climate change issues, has posted the Twitter feed for ICCA, which is based at the University of Nairobi. If you'd like to see more about, what researchers are doing here or get engaged or even perhaps take up studies at the ICCA, which is focused on a curriculum on adaptation to climate change for the region, please do follow them on Twitter. And we have our link to Climate Week as well posted on there. And then if you have any parting shot. Oh, wait, I do have a question.
I was actually waiting for that part. I'm like, there's something she's missing.
We're not letting you go just like that. So Mawazo Institute, Mawazo means ideas in Kiswahili, and we're really focused on ideas and big ideas. And Edna has been a guest on our Nairobi Ideas podcast before, so you can also hear her talk on our Nairobi Ideas podcast. But we always like to ask, experts, researchers, the people we're engaging with, what is your big idea, right? So what is your big idea for, either implementation or adaptation of circular economy, and how this can move the needle forward when it comes to planetary health?
Okay, so for anyone who happened to listen to the podcast, the big idea is the same, but I alluded to it a little bit when I was doing the presentation. And what I want to be able to see is circular economy concepts similar to what I told you guys when it comes to loop, that you can go to a retail chain, get your materials in reusable packages, or even they're sent to you at home in reusable packages, and then you use them, put them back, and then they get reused in the system. So that type of circularity in retail chains is my hope and big idea. And I keep saying, anyone who's looking to go into that space, you can reach out. Those are things I'm seeing circularity to that scale, where it now impacts every single consumer, and consumers is everyone. When it starts impacting single consumer, then the conversation will be larger. And with that, even talking about reusable packaging is also trying to figure out what alternative types of packaging can we use, especially for things that tend to be single use. For example, maybe the plastics and the cutlery and things like that. So can we use, or algae, for example, that when you finish having your, what do you call it? In case you didn't bring your reusable bottle, so you had to buy a single one, you can eat it after it and then you're full and hydrated. So these are some of the innovations I'm actually looking to see in the country and in the continent, and to support as well. So that's my big idea. Thanks for the question. I almost pulled it out of you, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Edna. I really look forward to being able to eat my bottles. Wouldn't that be just a fun experience? And I think for everyone here, just let's think about how we can implement some of these ideas and solutions. Edna talked about how our genes go through a whole life cycle, right? And now I'm thinking about what I can do in my own little sphere of influence to ensure that, I'm reusing the products that I am continuing to purchase. Think about the things that you're purchasing and make decisions are supportive of sustainability. And with that, thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next Mawazo Institute event. Please join the KCIC events. Please join the ICCA events. They are lots of fantastic people thinking about these issues. And it's just about engaging with those communities and those networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.